Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the greatest games on the Blizzard. My name is Marcus Speller. With me, of course, is Jonathan Wilson. And with us this week is Sid Lowe, journalist based in Spain, whose voice is regularly heard on the Guardian Football Weekly podcast, a contributor to The Guardian, World Soccer 442, among many others, and an author with works that include Fear and Loathing in La Liga and Catholicism, War, and the Foundation of Francoism. Sid, a pleasure to have you on the pod.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Did I get enough in there at the
introduction?
Yeah,
it just made me laugh to hear someone name check the Catholicism book, because that's kind of the disappearing book that almost doesn't exist. Partly because, like most academic texts, it's about £100 to buy the bloody thing.
Yeah, well, I just for those completionists, Sid Lowe completionists out there, they need to know of these titles, But yes, also it shows your repertoire as well, my good man.
Oh yes.
Well, Sid, today we go back to January 1997. Sporting-Gijón 0, Real Oviedo 0. Why have you chosen this game?
I've given you a real classic. This is just a fantastic game from end to end. Goals, just amazing chances.
Sure, you don't want a Classico, Sid? Are you sure?
I mean, look, I must admit there was a little bit of me that thought I don't really know which game to do, in so much as I could have done loads of games, in so much as this game is mostly shit, that there really isn't a huge amount happening in it. But I was kind of driven, and I'm going to blame Jonathan now, because I think blaming Jonathan is quite a good approach to life. And he kind of said, you could do any game you want, and it doesn't necessarily need to be about a game that everyone can engage with. In fact, if it's a little bit left field, then so much the better. And then Jonathan also said something very, very important to me, which was, we've had a lot of Liverpool.
These are the secret conversations that go on behind the doors of the Blizzard.
And I'll be honest with you, if there is a single game that I would kind of pluck out the sky whenever I'm asked about a game, it would probably be the 1986 FA Cup final. But you've had a lot of Liverpool, so let's do something else, and something that kind of allows us. I don't really know what it allows us to talk about. I suppose it just allows us to talk about the whole idea of discovering a football team, having a new experience. And I think one of the beauties, which I believe that I've now lost, and it sometimes upsets me that I've now lost this. One of the beauties, of course, of going abroad and writing from a foreign country is that sense that everything you see is a discovery. And I must admit, I miss that now, because I've been in Spain for so long that I feel like I'm not discovering anything. And I suspect that my writing is worse because of that. Now, it may well be that there's, if you like, a kind of a background of knowledge that I didn't have when I first came. But now when I go to a game, not everything jumps at me. Not everything makes me think, oh, that's worth telling. Because, of course, and actually, in a way, it would be quite nice to have the sort of the innocence of discovery again, or the freshness, the newness of it. So I guess the long and short of this is I'm now currently announcing my intention to leave Spain and go and become a correspondent in Uruguay, which is definitely the place I want to go and watch football, I think, for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Jonathan.
I find it fascinating you say that, because without meaning to make this too self-indulgent and too much about the practice of journalism, but when I got the gig as the FT's football correspondent, it very quickly became this terrible treadmill of, and in those days it was only a big four, so just going constantly Chelsea, United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, United, Liverpool, Arsenal, and you go press conference game, press conference game, press conference game, press conference game, and you pretty quickly get, or I found myself pretty quickly getting jaded. And there are correspondents who cover the same club for 30, 40 years and seem to do it with remarkable capacity to find new things to talk about and remarkable energy and enthusiasm. I don't have that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why I go to the Cup of Nations every 2 years, why I spent so much time in Argentina, is because I enjoy that practice of finding out new stuff and then conveying that to an audience. Now I recognize, particularly as you get older and physically it wears you out, the travel. You end up sort of settling into a bit of a rhythm, and you do get, the compensation is, as Sid says, you do get this sort of wealth of knowledge, and you can refer back to things you've seen previously. But it is a different type of journalism, and it perhaps lacks the sort of the vigor and the energy and the spark that you have when you come across these things for the first time.
The enthusiasm, definitely the enthusiasm. And, I mean, in a way, I appreciate that even this in itself is getting kind of caught in a rut. But for example, I'd be willing to bet, now I might be wrong about this, but over the last 10 seasons in Spain, my first Monday morning column of the season in The Guardian, for the first weekend of the season, going back 10 years, I reckon at least 9 of them are on a newly promoted team, 8 or 9 of them. Because in a way, it's like, actually, you know what, this is me going to them because I want to see it, because it feels new to me. And now, obviously, it's not true that you haven't watched anyone in the second division play, but normally those clubs coming up, there's that sense of something new and that enthusiasm and the excitement and the discovery. And yeah, I mean, the other thing you say, Jonathan, that people seem to do remarkably well covering the same club for ages. Quite a lot of the journalists that, of course, we know most of them, also do it remarkably enthusiastically, some of them. And I find that quite hard work. And one of the reasons why I'm a slightly weird Spanish football correspondent, I think, is precisely because, despite having written the book on it, quite literally written a book on it, I don't find Madrid and Barcelona as interesting as the other clubs. In part, I think, because I feel like I want to tell people things they don't know, rather than maybe just give them a different view on something they already do know, or even not a different view. Maybe I'm saying the same things that they already know. And I'd much rather go and see Eibar play or something like that, just because it's different. It's something else.
So in 1997, where were you then in terms of sort of career and so on? Because this is the year of the game that you've chosen, of course.
Yeah, and in a way, this goes well beyond journalism, in that this is discovery in the purest sense, if you like. So 96-97 is the season, that says it all, doesn't it? The season in which I go to Oviedo University. So it's, the year in which I go. It's the academic year, the season in which I go to Oviedo. And actually, as you can imagine, this is a discovery well beyond Real Oviedo. It's a discovery of all sorts of things. And this is one of the reasons as well why, on a purely subjective level, although I would probably argue that there's an objective case to be made here as well, there has never in my life been a player make a single season impact on me like Brazilian Ronaldo at Barcelona. But it may well be because it's the first season I live in Spain. And I'll be honest with you, I'd never heard of him. Well, I don't know, I might have heard him get mentioned in Holland, but he turns up at Barcelona, and I go to Spain. And so, of course, what happens when you go to Spain is, even if you do go, and we did this as a very small group of English guys living in Oviedo, you go every Saturday and watch the English game, whatever it was, shown on Spanish TV, only one a week. But you then you go, right, okay, I'm in Spain now, let's do Spanish football. And then you have this thing, because Ronaldo was a thing, just unbelievably good, just destroying teams on his own. As I say, genuinely, all these amazing Messi seasons that I've watched, I could agree that objectively some of his seasons were better than Ronaldo. But that sense of discovering something I'd never seen or never heard of, which is why I think Ronaldo for me has this kind of wow factor that probably only Maradona has. Because, of course, in 86, when I'm 9 years old, when that World Cup starts, I'm 10, I think, on the day of the quarterfinal, Brazil against France. Again, Maradona was a discovery. And I'm not saying no one had heard of him, but back then you didn't watch international football like you do now. So you did discover people. And so that was an entire year of discovery for me. It's a new place, it's a new football. And of course, in my case, because I lived in Oviedo, it crystallizes around Real Oviedo. And this game in January 1997 is a discovery because it's the biggest of the games, because it's Real Oviedo away against the local rivals, Sporting-Gijón, and everything that goes with that as an experience.
I mean, can you explain a bit about Oviedo as a town? I mean, where is it? What's it like?
So Oviedo is the capital of Asturias, which is the principality within Spain. So a bit like Prince Charles is the Prince of Wales, the heir to the throne is the Prince of Asturias. That doesn't really mean very much, to be perfectly honest. It's an area that's wet. It's an area that's mountainous, that has a long history of coal mining, a long, if you like, left-wing history as well, politically speaking. There was an Asturias Revolution in 1934, 2 years before the Spanish Civil War. It has a kind of a very proud identity in that sense, although it doesn't have an independent identity like, for example, Galicia or Catalonia or the Basque Country has. In fact, there's a phrase that Spaniards like to use, because the Reconquista against the Moors supposedly begins at the Battle of Covadonga, which is in Asturias in 11, which year is it? 11, Oh, crikey. I should know this. 49, I think, but I'm not completely sure about that.
I don't think
And
anyone's
there's
going
this
to
phrase
pull you up on that, Sid. Don't worry.
Someone will. Someone always does. It'll probably show my bias somehow. So there's this phrase that gets used in Asturias, which is Asturias is Spain. The rest of it is just conquered territory, because that's where, it's the only part that wasn't conquered by the Moors and where the reconquest supposedly starts. And yet it's curious because, as I've just said, Asturias in theory is a place with a left-wing identity, but Oviedo, being the capital city of it, is very much, if you like, a kind of a bourgeois enclave in that. And to be honest, Oviedo is very prim as a city, very clean, very smart, very elegant, but a brilliant place to go to university and study.
Jonathan, what were your thoughts on La Liga around that time in 1997? Because for me, that was when Sky Sports started showing it, and there was a bit of interest over here.
Yeah, I mean, being honest, I didn't know anything about it. We saw clips of Ronaldo doing brilliant things every now and again.
Sure.
And beyond that, really not very much. I mean, I was at university then, and I'm not even sure we had Sky at university.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we did have it. So my football was match of the day and whatever live game you could find, or you go to the pub to watch it.
Mm.
So at the time, my knowledge of La Liga would have been next to nil. Obviously, subsequently, I've gone back and doing the book on Barcelona. You look at Robson's season and everything, but no, at the time, my knowledge would have been almost nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
but I mean, what I was struck by, because you wrote a piece about this game for The Guardian when at the beginning of lockdown, we were all asked to just write 600 words about your favourite game because they were desperately trying to fill some space. And what most people seem to do was to do a game about a team they supported, so they were able to be much more sort of emotionally and individually engaged. And you obviously became an Oviedo fan, but I was struck by what you were talking about, and the sort of the travel to this game and so a sense of menace, sense of threat, the police. And it was exactly what I'd had going to Sunderland away games when I was sort of 17, 18. So there is something kind of very, I don't even know what the word is, but that sort of first sense of taking on the identity of a club and that bringing you into situations you wouldn't normally be in. There is something viscerally stirring about that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And obviously, the other thing is, for me, this was possibly even more new than it would have been for you, had you been the student that had turned up in Oviedo and gone to this game, because, as you say, you'd experienced it. I, in truth, hadn't. I'm past the point now where I can pretend otherwise. I'm a London Liverpool fan. And so, obviously, while I went to a lot of Liverpool away games, I didn't do the travel to game. I didn't have that kind of part of the package, which is that you travel together in big numbers. I was traveling with my dad to games. And so it's true that you would see occasionally fairly scary things because, I saw Liverpool play at all over London, basically. So some of those weren't always particularly pleasant. And the one that I really remember very clearly was seeing Liverpool at Loftus Road against QPR. I used to go to QPR a lot because my older brother's a QPR fan. But being in the Liverpool end, which wasn't an end, it was a side at Loftus Road, and it would be standing, and the police having to pull us out because, and this was pre-Hillsborough, and he looked back on it in the context of Hillsborough and how scary it was, pull us out because it was too squashed. And so literally they had the kids pulled us out because I was below people's waists, couldn't see anything. And I remember them having us lined up, sitting on the pitch. We were literally sitting around the edge of the pitch while they waited for a space to open further down the pitch and literally walk us along the pitch and put us back in, but put us back in at a part that wasn't quite so squashed. But I never had this kind of go to grounds and experience the menacing quite that way that I had with this game. And because, of course, as I say, because part of it is the travel. And the thing that really sticks with me about this game is twofold. One is getting a train to Gijón from Oviedo, which is about 35 kilometers. And the other is walking from the train station to Gijón's ground and seeing, if you like, that and seeing and feeling that sense of menace there.
Mm. All right, chaps, let's have a quick break and then we'll talk about the game itself and a bit more Real Oviedo. So join us in just a moment. Welcome back to the Greatest Games on the Blizzard. Sid, you were just talking about the journey to the game and so on. Do you think, I mean, you mentioned that you're a Liverpool fan, but obviously a Londoner. Was it was it sort of like a conscious decision to kind of support a local side? You know, you were studying in Oviedo and you thought, this is maybe my chance to do that, or was it just because they were the local team? You didn't, being a student, you didn't have that much cash, and some of the other sides are a bit further away.
I think what happens is I think this is true in all areas of life. I think we sometimes retrospectively justify decisions that we make. And obviously, you know, writing about Madrid and Barcelona, this has always been something that I've been very clear on. You know, a lot of Barcelona fans, obviously there's a whole narrative that's built up around Barcelona. And yet when those fans chose to be Barcelona fans, they probably weren't aware of it. They probably had no sense of it. It's just something you fell into. And I feel like with Oviedo, maybe there's an element of that. So they're just the local team. But subsequently, I think that this wasn't glory hunting. And, you know, and I'm acutely aware, being a Londoner who supports Liverpool, I'm acutely aware of that sense that I really shouldn't, right? I'm acutely aware of the fact that all my friends are Spurs fans. And I kind of wish I was a Spurs fan. It feels wrong to not be a Spurs fan, or at least an Arsenal fan, given that I'm from North London. And I think with Oviedo, I quite like the fact that subsequently I don't know if I would say necessarily make a thing of, but buy into the idea that I'm a supporter of a smaller club. In a way, though, it was even more simple. It was just that they are the local team. So, for example, we turn up in Oviedo on a bus from Bilbao, me and a guy called Chris, and we're on the bus and we're listening to the radio. And Oviedo are playing Barcelona. This is Pep Guardiola playing for Barcelona. This is actually the day that Guardiola meets Juanma Lillo. It's the day that Oviedo play Barcelona. And they and we're listening on the radio. Leave it. That's bad luck. We arrive in Oviedo, when is it? The back end of September, maybe the very start of October for the academic year. We've already missed Barcelona. That's a real bummer. You know, Barcelona comes to the city and we're not going to get the chance to go and see them play. And we look at the fixture list and we realise we've missed 3 home games. We've missed Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Athletic Club Bilbao. You think, fuck our luck. I mean, this is, you know, and so of course, me and Chris, who had decided that we would probably go and watch Oviedo every week, decided at that point that we're not going to buy season tickets. Because what's the point, right? Because we missed the 3 big games that we really wanted to see. But then what happens is we go and see Oviedo play against Deportivo La Coruña, I think it is. The B teams play, and then that weekend the A teams play. And we went to every single Oviedo game that season until I broke my ankle. And I even went to a game in a wheelchair. In fact, I went to the reverse fixture of this, Oviedo against Sporting, in a wheelchair at the back end of the season. But it was just because you kind of get into it. And also because I think what you discover as well is that a football club is a fantastic way into a community. Into you know, and the truth is that however much you turn up in a place and you're young and you're a bit cocky and you think you're going to be all right, it's nice to be able to talk to people. And to have a reason to do so.
But did you find it accessible when you went to Real Oviedo? Because I mean, to be honest with you, on a sort of perhaps a more sort of silly local level. See, for me, I never had a team like, say, Jonathan growing up. You know, Jonathan from Sunderland, Sport Sunderland, not too dissimilar to yourself, Sid, although it wasn't particularly attached to a side, and it really went a number of years without supporting a team and so on. And it was when I moved up to Southwest London, I thought to myself, right, let's try and do this properly, if that's even, I mean, it doesn't bother me so much if somebody supports a team not from where they're from, but I think there is a kind of I don't know, a niceness or a purity to it or something like that. And so I started going to watch Fulham, because I thought, well, this is the local side. I'm now I've lived in the area for a number of years, but Fulham are a very accessible side. Of course, you know, you get a lot of people who move to London from other parts of the UK or other parts of the world, and Fulham become their second team. And for some people, they may even creep into being their first team. But I think if you try to do that to, say, Chelsea or Arsenal or Spurs, it might be a little bit more tricky, perhaps. So did you find it accessible with Real Oviedo? Because as you say, you're clearly not a glory supporter if you're going along to see them.
Yes, I did. I mean, on firstly on the mechanical level, which is that you could get tickets for every game. In fact, not only that, but we managed to almost every week. We managed to get tickets that were the under 16 category, so we were getting them pretty cheap as well. I don't know how we got away with that. I think fundamentally no one really cared. The other thing that was that, you know, at the start I was talking about discovery. I sometimes felt like there was a bit of a discovery of them of us as well, because there was a kind of a curiosity element of these English guys going to games. Yeah. Now that didn't really happen with the home games, because of course with a home game you go into the stadium and then you leave the stadium again. And Chris
lived within a minute and a half walk of the ground. I mean, you could see the ground from his kitchen window, not the pitch, unfortunately, or else we might never have gone to games. And so maybe less so at the home games. But certainly we went on some away games. We decided, right, okay, we're going to do this properly after a while. So we went away to see them at Real Madrid. This game, obviously, which is the really big one against Sporting. We saw them away at Real Sociedad. We saw them away at, where else did we go? We went to one of the other Basque teams. We didn't go to Bilbao, but I can't remember where else we saw them. But we went away a few times. And what happens in Spain is that the away games are run by supporters clubs. So you go on a bus with people on the supporters club. And so, for example, me and Chris, we often still talk about the game. I think it was away at Real Sociedad. We're on a bus for 6 hours. You get stopped on the way into the Basque country. The police come on, they throw everyone off. They look through the bus because they're convinced you're up to no good. Looking back on it, probably some of the people we travelled with probably were up to no good. Maybe we weren't always aware of this. And I think there was a kind of, what are these two random English guys doing with us? And certainly I remember being on those trips. They would come to us to talk to us rather than us having to make an effort. So I go, hang on, who are these two guys here? Because what we would do would be to go to the supporters club in the week before the game and buy the tickets off them. And as I say, you've got a few fairly choice characters among some of the people there. And that's what happened. Now, the sporting trip was probably a little bit more organised, a little bit more bigger numbers as well involved. But so I think that accessibility certainly played a part, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think when you describe travelling to this game, you were all crammed on a train, and to quote your piece, glasses of piss passed along precariously and chucked out the window. I mean, that's community building stuff.
I remember that so clearly, because that train was rocking from side to side, and I still have this image of this glass thinking that is spilling, just get it out the window quick, and it would be passed to someone who's kind of get it out the window, and just the sort of that was community building in a way. I mean, it was a bit weird, and with hindsight, I felt a little bit uneasy even writing that piece of The Guardian, because there's a bit of me that thought, is there a risk here that it feels like I'm celebrating something that I probably shouldn't be celebrating, something that I probably shouldn't be saying is a good thing? Because, I mean, objectively, a lot of this isn't a good thing. But there was that sense of, everyone turned up at the train station. I think it was a Sunday morning, and we're packed onto this train, and we're absolutely packed onto this train. And then the other thing that happened was that on the way there, obviously, one of the things about trains, unlike buses, is they can't go off course. I mean, except in really disastrous moments, they can't go off course. And so you have this situation where as we start getting close to Gijón, some Sporting fans know which stations we're going to be going through, even though we're not stopping. So we got to a point where there were fans waiting on platforms in the sort of 10 kilometres or so before Gijón, chucking things at the train as it went past. So we're on the train hearing this thudding noise against the side of the train as we're going through. And this whole thing kind of crystallizes for me in one image, which was the housemate of one of this little group of English guys that lived in Oviedo, a guy called Jaime, who I remember having a poster on his wall basically referring to putísima Gijón, in other words, the absolute scum that is Gijón. And I think, if I remember rightly, him even having sort of a mini baseball bat with the words Gijón written on the side. And, yeah, I mean, I think it was. In fairness, I think it was tongue in cheek. I don't think it was, a serious thing. I mean, although admittedly with hindsight, you think, that wasn't really. But I remember when we said to him, me and Chris and this other Chris, hey, we might go to the derby. And he said, and this is the image that for me crystallizes the whole game, wear a workman's helmet. What? He said, wear a workman's helmet. What do you mean? A blue one, if you can find one. Obviously, we couldn't. And as it turned out, none of us wore workman's helmet. In my mind's eye, I can see us getting off the train in Gijón, and I can see loads of people in workman's helmets. Reality is, it was probably only a dozen or so. But, in my mind, it's like everyone's wearing a workman's helmet. And of course, this was because once you got off the train station and you're going to the stadium, and you're taken there by police, but you're walking, and it's about 3 kilometres, and it's along the seafront. And of course, what happens is some of the Sporting fans line up and chuck things at you as you go past. And so it's like, that's why you wear it. And so in my mind, in a way that, this kind of crystallizes in that moment in which Jaime says to us, wear a workman's helmet. Now?
I mean, the colour blue is obviously
Just
is that
the
for
colour of the club? Yeah, no,
yeah,
no other reason.
I was thinking maybe it was like a UN kind of blue. They might think, "Oh, we'll leave them alone," you know, kind of they're the peacekeepers, perhaps.
If only. If only.
Talking about the actual football itself, if we can for a moment, Jonathan, Real Oviedo were managed by Juanma Lillo, who we mentioned earlier on, who's of course at Manchester City at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Sid mentioned the first meeting between him and Guardiola, and now he's his assistant. So I mean, look, Sid knows us better than me, and he did that brilliant interview for Blizzard with Leo. So, Sid, tell us about Juanma Lillo.
I mean, it's difficult to know where to start, except to say that I love Juanma Lillo. So that day that we were arriving in Oviedo and we were missing this Barcelona game. Genuinely, at the end of the game, there's literally a knock on the door, and the Oviedo dressing room door, and it's Pep Guardiola who wants to talk to Juanma Lillo because he really likes the way that his team plays. And Juanma will always tell you, and this is very much in character for Juanma, but they played wonderful football that year. And as I always say to him, yeah, but we didn't win very often. He said, but we played lovely football, the way we brought it out from the back, you know, the quality of the passing and stuff. And I think even that's probably not entirely true. But there were certain things. But Juanma is a guy who, I mean, to try and cut through a lot of his history, is a guy who has a very, very clear sense of footballing identity, of what football should be, of how you should teach it, how you should play it, which is all about technique. It's all about quality. He's incredibly challenging to talk to, but brilliant fun, because everything you say that has even the slightest glimmer of it being predicated upon an assumption, he'll seize on it and it will go for you. So, but you say this, and that's just not the case. And then what's that you mean? I mean, to take one of his phrases, in Spanish they refer to it as the second play. In English we refer to it as the second ball. You know, long ball, knockdown, second ball. And in Spanish it's the second play. And Juanma will always say, "Well, what's the second play? You need to tell me what the first play was if there's a second play." Well, also, you know, this, and obviously in part this is pedantry, but it's a brilliantly enjoyable, challenging pedantry. And as a manager, he's a manager who in Spain divides opinions because he's seen as a purist. He's seen as a, I mean, I suppose you've got the Bilardo Menotti thing, which has sort of develops a bit in Spain, and he would very definitely kind of, you know, he's the philosopher side of this debate and so on. And he has had very mixed results as a coach in terms of results, but he has a very, I think, right, one of the people who best expressed it, I suppose, actually, is Henrik Goitom, who played with him at Almeria, who always said, if I was setting up a youth system, explaining to kids how to play football, I would have Juanma Lillo as the director of that youth system every single time. If I was choosing a manager to save my team from relegation, I'm not sure I'd call him.
He did keep Real Oviedo up that year.
Oh, he left before the end of the season, didn't he? He went after 34 games.
Yeah, and you know, there were. I'm not going to deny that there were times during that season when Oviedo's fans chanted "Leo vete ya," which is "Leo go now." I'd like to point out at this stage, I never wanted him to leave because I always found him enjoyable, at least.
He's an extraordinary character, an absolute journeyman.
Yeah.
He's managed all around the world, and he's been an assistant as well, number 2, and so on. As you say, now he's popped up at Manchester City. So goodness knows what him and Guardiola are concocting at the moment. But I mean, Sid, going.
By the way, he is a reader of Inverting the Pyramid.
Well, aren't we all?
Yeah,
you
know, I did supply him with a copy of that at one point, and he's fascinated by football history. You know, one of the reasons why I get on with him is because there've been times. I mean, I first met him working on television together when he was a pundit, and so was I. I mean, talk about being out of your depth and, you know, kind of in a competition you simply can't win. But one of the reasons I get on with him is because he would ask things about English football, and, you know, he loved the kind of ethos behind the Liverpool of the 70s, although I suspect that the reality is slightly different to the narrative ethos of pass and move, or you pass and move and then pass it back to the goalkeeper from 60 yards. But you know, but he sort of loves that, and he's a massive football fan in a cultural sense as well. You know, he will make a thing about telling you, oh, I read that in that magazine. I've got every back issue of Graphico. I've got every single issue of, you know, this magazine and that magazine and the other. And he's a you know. He's a man, for example, who would love Blizzard.
Excellent.
If his English was better.
Well, Sid, has he read Catholicism, War and the Foundation of Francoism? You know, that's the question.
I'm pretty sure he hasn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, maybe.
But I mean, can you explain a bit more about Guardiola's relationship with him and why Guardiola admires him so much?
Because Guardiola sees him as someone who teaches. He sees him as someone who has a steadfast belief in a kind of football that Guardiola would agree with, that's based on positioning, that's based on use of the ball rather than based on physical qualities, that's based on understanding, I would say, even more than technical qualities. Obviously, this is a football that's rooted in technical ability, but it's actually rooted more than anything else in the ability to construct. And so one of the things that Leo will always say is, hang on a minute, don't deconstruct this. You know, so for example, I remember in that Blizzard interview, when I said to him something along the lines of, because he was at Almeria at the time, I think, or had just left Almeria, and he had Albert Crusat playing on one of the two wings. And Albert Crusat was incredibly fast. And I would talk about, you know, playing a way that will release Crusat and all the rest of it. And he said, yeah, but you're taking Crusat out of the equation of everything else, out of the context. I said, well, of course I am, but you must know that that's one of the assets that you've got, or one of the qualities you've got as part of your team. So you build elements, you build mechanisms that allow him to go one-on-one. And he makes this point about how, you know, this decontextualization of the game doesn't help, and that everything is interconnected and so on, and you can't break it down and put it back together again. And you know, for example, talking about physical training, he said, well, just running around the field doesn't train you for anything except for running around the field. That it doesn't teach you anything unless you have the context around it. And I think Guardiola likes that. So we use the horrible word holistic, but likes that kind of holistic view of it, that this is all about how you construct everything rather than taking it apart piece by piece, and contextualizing and understanding and I suppose interpretation is probably the best word of it.
Mm-hmm. And because Guardiola went to play with him right at the end of his career in Mexico, yeah.
And he would claim, and Guardiola has claimed, I don't know if this is entirely true or not, that he went because it was Leo, because he wanted to work with Leo. And Guardiola, for example, when I think it was Jus Bassat was running for presidential elections, presumably in 2008, but I can't remember which year it was. It might have been the 2003 elections, I'm not sure. Bassat was a presidential candidate. His director of football, bizarrely enough, even though he was very, very young at the time, was Guardiola, and Guardiola's coach would have been Leo. So had that presidential ticket have won, if you like, the kind of the roles might well have been inverted to what we expect now. Maybe Guardiola would never have become a coach.
So I want to turn our attention back to Real Oviedo, and inevitably we're going to talk about the financial troubles that they've suffered recently. In the early 2000s, you know, the sort of where it kind of began, suffering 2 relegations in quick succession, because one can forget. I mean, I sort of always think of them as a lower league side, and I know they're in the Segunda division at the moment, but of course they weren't always there. They were on a Liga side for a number of seasons. What was going on at the time? You know, you were there sort of supporting them and so on. Because the mayor, am I right in saying that sort of one of the local political figures suggested that you know, he proposed that Real Oviedo should be put out of business. Yeah. What was the mood around with the fans at that time?
Right. Well, I mean, it's
obviously very difficult.
Yeah, as you say, obviously Oviedo. I mean, historically, I think Oviedo probably spent more seasons in the second division than any other division. But I think it's only by 6 or 7 more seasons more than in the first division. Historically, they are a first or second division team. They were a first division team, obviously, the year I lived in Oviedo, hence the fact that it was Barcelona and so on. They had really big financial difficulties, and that season that they went down, 2001, which is the season when Radiantic was manager, Stan Collymore signed halfway through the season. So I mean, if we like, we can blame it all on Stan. Let's do that. Let's blame it all on Stan. What I do like about Stan is that when he signed Radiantic said this quote along the lines of, you know, we could be talking about the best signing this club's ever made. When they went down and Stan left, Radiantic came out and said, signing Stan had nothing to do with me. So, well, Radi, I mean, to be fair, he didn't claim the first time around that it was his doing, but you know, it was a bit of a sea change there. But they were a poor team that year, and they went down. But there was a series of financial difficulties, and they were relegated administratively as well. So went down 2 divisions at once, essentially because a series of players, and the way that the legal system works in Spain is through denuncias, I suppose you would say, formal complaints, formal legal complaints. You go to the police and you make a denouncement. This led to a situation in which the only way to save Oviedo was, at that stage, was for the players to withdraw that complaint. A series of them, including the club captain at the time, a guy called Ollie, who's from Oviedo, which I think made it more painful, refused to. So they end up getting sent down to Second Division B. They end up even in the Third Division. Now, to put this into context for people, because in a way, Second Division B and Third Division doesn't sound so bad, right? But second division B is the division below the second division, and it's 4 divisions. In fact, this year it's going to be 102 teams. It's going to be 5 divisions, but it's traditionally 4 divisions. So you're talking about 82 teams.
But also the lower leagues in Spain, it's not the same as in England.
Well, that's what I mean. So in terms of numbers and also in terms of the theoretical status. So theoretically, it's amateur football.
Yes, exactly.
It's not amateur football, but theoretically it is. When people talk about football professional in Spain, they mean the first and second division. You know, to put it in terms of jurisdiction, it's run by the federation, not by the league, for example. Anyway, so in the second division B is anything from the 3rd tier to the 7th tier, because it's 4 divisions, 82 teams. Then below that, the 3rd division, there's a 3rd division for each and every one of the 17 autonomous communities in Spain. I think it's something like 360 teams. So what's 3rd division doesn't sound too bad in English terms, but it's anything from the 8th division to the, now my maths is going to fail me, what would it be, 32nd division or something. I'll just chuck that off the top of my head.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's really quite bad, and you just don't generate any money down there. So Oviedo were in crisis. They had an owner who disappeared, who disappeared. I think he went to Panama. He was looked for. He was being looked for by Interpol at one point. And there were 2 crisis points at which they might have gone out of business. One was in 2003, which is when the local council basically looked at the situation, and at the risk of going against everything I believe in, you can see a certain logic in what they were suggesting, even if I don't share it or accept it at all, which was, look, the financial situation is awful. At one point, there was even a suggestion they might merge with Sporting-Gijón, that there would be a Real Asturias for the whole of the region, which is completely inviable. But at that point, there was a suggestion, look, this is not possible. They're playing in a municipal stadium. They've got no money. They cannot survive. So what the local government said, well, we'll withdraw the support from the club, and we'll put our weight behind a club called Club Astur, which is a 3rd division team. And they effectively become Oviedo. And they would be called Oviedo AFC, Oviedo Astur Football Club, right? So then you say, so we'll put the money behind them because they can effectively start from scratch. We'll put them in Oviedo's colours. We'll play them in the Tartiere Stadium, and this can be the new Oviedo. And it was referred to by Oviedo fans as if you like, the stillborn fetus. You know, this is a kind of a deformed monster. This can't happen. And what happened was that the fans reacted. And the fans reacted, and the club's president at the time, a guy called Manolo Lafuente, refused to effectively sign the decree of, what would you call it, of going out of business, the
winding up order.
Yeah, the winding up order. That's the word I'm looking for, like the death warrant, effectively. And so Oviedo fought back, and they basically got rid of all the players and started again effectively with the B team players from a young level, all of them young, all of them making virtually no money, and backed by the fans who raised money, who fought politically. So we're not going to accept this. The local council could see that there's kind of like a political pressure against this, marches in the street, bring and buy sales, all sorts of stuff. And so the fans saved the club in 2003. What then happens is this owner that I'm talking about, you know, then buys a club. Theoretically, this is rescued, but the money gets wasted again, and they find themselves in another dire situation in 2012, when again the fans rise up and rescue the club effectively for a share issue that raises the money to make them short-term viable and long-term possible to save. And with that share issue at the very end of it, and the fans had raised sufficient money to save the club in the long term, what happens is that Carlos Slim comes in and effectively buys the rest of the shares necessary. So Oviedo now are owned by pretty much the richest man in the world.
Hang on, the shares I bought then, the shares you made me buy, what's happened to them?
Well, they're worth nothing now.
They still exist, but of course they've been diluted. They're probably worth more than they were when you bought them, but you saved the club. I was
about to say, Sid, I mean, obviously we only have a certain amount of time and there's a lot to pack in there, but you have brushed over some of the fine work that yourself and Jonathan apparently did.
I bought 3 shares, I think. I didn't have a huge amount to do with it, but
all right, Jonathan, I'm trying to.
Yeah, I just remember Sid threatening me, kind of like, buy these shares. His mate in the miner's helmet had come round.
But a lot of people in England, largely probably through you, Sid, you know, promoting it and using threatening behaviour, according to Jonathan, you know, bought shares in Real Oviedo and did help the club. And you know, seen sort of the odd documentary here and there where Real Oviedo fans seem to be quite touched that supporters in England would bother kind of helping their club.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you asked earlier about accessibility. One of the lovely things now is because that happened and because English fans played such a big part. So, I mean, so to cut a very long story short, there was a share issue in which they said, right, we need to raise this money within 2 weeks. I think it was 1.9 million euros. for mid or short-term sustainability. I think they needed 4 million euros for any kind of long-term and future. And they reached that 1.9 million euros through shares bought by fans all over the world, pushed. But a lot of those fans were in England. And so there was a real sense that Oviedo had effectively found itself a fan base almost, or at least found itself some people that had helped out in England. And what that means now is that when fans go to England now, because go to Oviedo now from England and go to a game, because there's an awareness that there was a role played by them at a time when Oviedo were in genuine danger of going out of business. There's a real fondness now, I think, for foreign fans who turn up, and there's a real embracing of them from other supporters. And so now, in terms of accessibility, if Jonathan was to turn up, for example, in Oviedo and go into the right bars in the city and say, I'm a Real Oviedo shareholder, that's it, have a drink, have some dinner, come to the game, and that's created a wonderful accessibility, which is actually genuinely quite moving when you see it now.
But I mean, you were sort of, there was presentations on the pitch to you and things, wasn't there? They were so grateful to what you'd done.
Yeah, there was a kind of a sense that from within Asturias, at least, that I'd kind of driven it quite hard, and that some of this had happened.
It tends to be you've driven it quite hard.
Yeah, but I mean, clearly I've driven you quite hard, at least. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I mean, it's lovely in terms of the accessibility of people going to Oviedo to games and stuff, and in terms of from a purely personal point of view, when I go, the way that people treat me is absurd. I mean, treat me with a warmth and a gratitude that, quite honestly, I don't deserve. But there you go. There's a lovely Di Stefano phrase, I think, when he was given the all-time Ballon d'Or, and he said, "I don't deserve it, but I'll pocket it." And so I think that's pretty much the way I see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in England, we look at you as the unofficial mayor of Oviedo, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'd like to think that if they ever got in trouble again, I wouldn't be putting my weight behind Club Astur. I'd be definitely putting it behind Real Oviedo.
Well, yeah, I think if they got in trouble again, Jonathan, all they need to offer him is a book signing, and he'll be there to help him out. Sure.
Tell you what, that could work. I mean, maybe you could do Oviedo as your next book.
I'm just going to sell more mainstream stuff.
I was about to say it's only slightly more left field than some of the books you've done. So there you go.
But Sid, it's been great talking to you about this. I mean, presumably, obviously, the answer is yes, but you would recommend when this pandemic and all that, the world has returned to something approaching what we think we know as normal, a sort of a trip to Real Oviedo for fans from England or elsewhere listening to this podcast to check out the city and the team. Absolutely,
I would, and we're talking about a derby. I would recommend the derby as well. And obviously, one of the things that happened when Oviedo went down to Segunda Division B is it meant that for many years they didn't play a derby. We went 12 years without an Asturias derby. In fact, Oviedo did play a few derbies, but it was against Sporting's B team, because B teams play in the National League in Spain. And so as an example, if you like, of how far Oviedo had fallen, you had this kind of sense of shame of playing against them. Came back, I was at the first derby back after 12 years, and just extraordinary in terms of the atmosphere. I went to the home one, not the away one, although I did go to one of the away ones against the B team in the Second Division B, and that was a bit edgy, to say the least. But obviously you go incognito because the stadium's not full and so on. But it's well worth seeing, and it's a beautiful city. Look, I probably shouldn't say this as an Oviedo fan, but go to Gijón as well, and go to Sporting, which is I think a great club in many ways. It's a club with a really good fan base that make a lot of noise. That I wish they were in the first division. Obviously, I don't want them I'd like them in the first division with us. That would be nice.
No, marvellous. Well, when the coast is clear, Jonathan, we'll pull up in the Bay of Biscay and we'll check out the sounds. Marvellous. Well, thank you very much, Sid, for talking to us about that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the pod.
Pleasure.
For more stories like that, do check out theblizzard.co.uk, everybody. Next week, Jonathan and myself will be back with another great game from the history of football. Until then, have a good one.